Thanks for joining us as we kick off another new week of all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Our goal with this show is to not only tell you what's happening, but really go beyond the headlines and give you the why. So all this week, we're taking your questions straight to the expert. And that starts tonight with the economy. A man you know well, Oakland University Associate Professor of Management, Michael Greiner, is in Studio C to answer your questions about where we are and where we're headed. We got some great questions from you. Stay tuned for that. And are President Trump and one of his biggest loyalists breaking up? There's a major beef, a major rift between the president and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene about the Epstein files. We're diving into that with Republican strategist Jason Rowe in about 20 minutes. And the Epstein files is where we begin tonight because President Trump made an about-face over the weekend, now saying Republicans should vote to release the file. And most Republicans will. The president said in a Truth Social post over the weekend, saying Republicans needed to get back on point, but repeated his claims that it's a, quote, Democratic hoax. Ahead of this historic vote, the back and forth continues in our nation's capital.
I will be voting for it, but to be clear, I think that the American people understand that right now, everything that the Democrats have tried to say that, Trump was somehow implicated is completely false.
This is clearly a jujitsu move by the president in his continued cover-up of these files. He is already under a legal obligation to produce these files to Congress and has not complied with the subpoena.
Now, even if the vote does pass the House, it's not clear if it'll actually get through the Senate, and President Trump also has veto powers. Stay tuned. Another busy night of news as always, so let's pick up the pace and run through some of the other big stories we're following right now. A federal judge scolds the Justice Department, accusing them of, quote, a disturbing pattern of profound investigative missteps while trying to indict this man, former FBI Director James Comey. That included what the judge called, quote, fundamental misstatements of the law, adding it could have undermined the grand jury process. Comey's accused of lying to Congress in 2020. His attorneys are trying to get grand jury transcripts released to them. Those proceedings are usually secret. To the White House, where President Donald Trump says he'll sell F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. It comes just a day before Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to our nation's capital. The president called the Saudis a great ally, but it comes despite concerns that technology from the F-35s could end up in the hands of China. That country has close ties to Saudi Arabia, and those concerns derailed a similar sale to United Arab Emirates back in 2020. President Biden put that sale on shortly after taking office. Staying in the Oval Office, where President Trump didn't rule out military action against Venezuela, while also saying he's open to talks with that country's leader, Nicolas Maduro. He's insisted the U.S. military's buildup and strikes on alleged drug boats are designed to push him out of office. The USS Gerald R. Ford arrived in the Caribbean this weekend. The Trump administration has conducted more than 20 strikes against vessels it accuses of carrying drugs. Dozens of people have died. The Trump administration hasn't provided evidence to support its claims about the vessels trafficking those drugs. All right, let's jump back into the Epstein files fight here. There's a lot of legal issues at play here, and we wanted to bring in a legal expert to really break it down for us. And it's a man you know well. Attorney Eli Muad is back in Studio C to break down everything we need to know. And Eli, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
This is like a bad cold that won't go away for President Trump, but one that he's saying, hey, let's kind of cough up something here. And in this case, he's saying, let's cough up the files.
Right.
What does this mean, and what do you make of the back and forth?
Well, I think the House is going to pass it, right? Then it goes to the Senate. We're going to see what happens with the Senate. But I was talking to a gentleman here earlier. We both agree that I think that he knows it's going to pass. I think he's got to let the files out. He's got to get rid of this subject, move on to other things.
Well, he kind of alluded to that, saying that Republicans kind of have to find their message or their ground again. And in doing this, he's basically saying there's nothing to see here. That's something he's said in the past as well. What do you make of what's in the files? Because we know that this is President Trump's Department of Justice, and in that DOJ are where the majority of these files. How many pages are we talking? What are we talking about?
I don't think there's any doubt. My understanding, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of pages, right? So you're either going to see a bunch of nothing burgers where there's just conversations going back and forth, or you may find some new players that may have something to do with some of the criminal issues. You may not. I don't know. You may find some other politicians out there, Republicans or Democrats. Only the Republicans know right now, because I know they've sifted through them. They know what's there. The question is exactly if it's going to cause any more problems for anybody else.
And we should be very clear that there are so many people out there in the world of politics who are Democrats whose names have been said to be involved with this file and in this file. Some of them have been unearthed. So we know that this is not some kind of a strike against Trump alone. We know that President Trump has said, look, I kind of broke up our friendship in 2004, 2005 with this guy because of some of the things that he saw. Let's move forward and talk about the process here. The Department of Justice has these files. What right does the public have to see things that the DOJ has in its possession?
All right. So once the documents have been voted on to be released by the House and the Senate, you can, and a lot of media will do this, is do a Federal Freedom of Information Act. Now, the government has the right to say, hey, it's protected by one of these exemptions. We don't know what they're going to say. But
protecting perhaps victims?
Victims, politicians, other people, we just don't know yet. So typically, once they're released like that, you can go after these documents, and the media will go after these documents and issue a Freedom of Information request to see what's in there.
You're an attorney. Obviously, you know the law better than anybody in this room right now. People often say things like guilty through association. That is not a binding anything in court. We have to be really careful. What kind of warning do you have, whether someone's a Democrat or a Republican on the other side of that camera, about people's names showing up in these files?
Right. So I do a lot of criminal work, as you know, also, and we get guilt by association all the time. But we also have jurors that listen to the facts and say, hey, not guilty. There was no guilt by association. So you got to remember that every person, if you're thinking guilt by association, you got to wait till all the facts come out. You got to wait, if it's a criminal issue, until a jury or there's a plea or something like that. You can't just automatically presume it's guilt by association. That's been happening too much lately.
Talk a little bit about the statute of limitations when it comes to these types of charges. This is old stuff.
Right. I can't really see, unless it's a murder, a kidnapping, something that has no statute of limitations to it. I just don't think it's going to really go anywhere like that. There are some long statute of limitations for sexual stuff in the federal system, like there is in the state system. Whether or not they find something else and it fits within that statute of limitations, I don't know yet. But certainly if it's a murder, so there's talk of a murder, there's talk of more than that, and more serious than that, yeah, you're going to have some issues with the statute of limitations.
This is the crossroads where politics and law meet, and that's why we bring you in here. But looking forward and kind of forecasting where this goes, as you said, the House, let's say the Republicans, so many of them said, yes, we'll vote on this. It passes the House. It goes to the Senate. We may find an uphill battle with the Senate. Right.
And that's what I was just reading. I read more than a couple articles today on that. And there is some issues here as to whether or not the Senate's going to pass it. I think the Senate's got to pass it. Get these documents out. Get it going. Let's get it off the chest of the American people and the government.
And you obviously have also the president who has veto power. That could play a role as well. He could say right now, hey, yes, let's cooperate, let's move forward, and then decide at the end perhaps to veto it?
Well, he's already said to release them. So if he vetoes them, that's a problem for him on some credibility issues.
Eli Muad, we're going to keep watching this, and I know you'll watch it carefully as well.
I do.
Thanks so much for your time
Good
here
to see
tonight
you,
on
Thank
The Pulse.
You. Okay.
All right, we're turning to the economy after the break. It affects all of us. So we're taking your questions right to the experts, and boy, did we get your questions when we asked for them. Oakland University Associate Professor of Management Michael Greiner is in Studio C next. What about tariffs? How is that going to impact all of us? You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics, and yes, the economy. Here to talk about where we are and where we're headed. And we're taking your questions. Oakland University Associate Professor of Management Michael Greiner, a regular on our newscast. And we always thank you for joining us. Thanks for being with us on The Pulse tonight.
Great to be here.
So when you're out and about, do you get people walking up to you when you say this is what you do, that they have questions about the economy? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it comes up. Yeah, people are definitely worried about it. It's definitely at the forefront of people's minds.
Well, I can tell you right now that Kaylee is one of the people who's a little concerned right now. Kaylee, thanks for writing into The Pulse, and thanks for your question. She's asking, Michael, what can we do to prepare and protect our money? How did people insulate their finances from economic turbulence back in the day, and how helpful would that be today? I don't know what back in the day, Kelly? Did you mean like way back before Michael was around, way before, or is it in the last 30 years? Right? What can people do?
Well, the biggest thing I would say for people to do right now is anything you could do to kind of pay down your debt and try to kind of keep the interest under control. Because so much of what people earn every month is just eaten up by this revolving debt, and it's incredibly high how much people are paying for credit card debt at this point. And the more that they're paying on that is essentially wasted money. So if they can stay away from that, perhaps pay down some of the debt, that would be helpful. And then beyond that, just simply saving some money. If there are some things you can defer, that's probably a good move right now. Just have that kind of a rainy day savings fund right now be very helpful.
There are so many things that we pay for every day that we don't realize every month in our statements that are hidden in there, subscriptions and double subscriptions to things that we don't need anymore. Maybe a gym that you stopped going to months ago. Yeah,
that's true. And there are actually, I think, some internet apps that you can use to help find different things that are kind of ongoing, because you're right. I mean, they do that automatically. In fact, economists specifically came up with this theory that this is based on, which is kind of you want to get people in the door and then kind of help them forget about it and make it an automatic thing.
This next question comes from Jason Richards. Jason, thanks for your question here on The Pulse. I was going to ask it like, hey, are we heading towards a recession? But Jason asked it in a way that we all talk and think, will it all crumble down? Because it seems like we're heading there. What do you think about that? Are we heading towards some kind of an economic downturn?
Well, I'm very concerned about that, I have to say. I mean, the thing that's really flashing warning signs for me right now has to do with artificial intelligence and AI. Now, it's kind of like the early internet, where this is clearly a valuable tool that's got a real future and is going to make a real difference in people's lives. The problem is right now we just don't know how that's going to happen. So what we're seeing a lot of right now are big investments going in and all kinds of speculative approaches. And so there's this sense of, let's keep throwing money at things, and hopefully at some point some of these companies are going to make money. And some of them will. The problem is a lot of them won't. And the question is which ones won't. And at some point you're going to have that all come crumbling down. I mean, we had it with the internet. I mean, a lot of people like you and me, unfortunately, are old enough to remember when we had the crash as a result of the internet bubble. Yeah. And I think that, unfortunately, that's kind of being set up to happen again.
So what happens when something like that occurs? You have basically a new industry at the helm. There's fear, right? And fear drives the emotion behind the economy, and then people kind of hold back their money, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I mean, to give you an idea of the depth of what we're dealing with right now, I mean, basically, AI right now is what's almost entirely powering the economy. Most of the rest of the economy right now is either stagnant in terms of growth or has actually been in recession, essentially. We actually talked about this on a prior show. And so as a result of that, virtually all the growth that we've seen in the stock market, which, as everybody knows, has been doing really well, but it's been because of AI and because of the tech sector. And in fact, the tech sector right now makes up a larger percentage of the stock indexes than it did right back before the crash for the internet. So it really just shows that we're kind of on the cusp right now.
So we're talking about the kind of the speculation about the industry and the investments being made in it. Stocks go up in the tech industry, but then when the rubber meets the road, for instance, in Saline right now, right down the road, right in Michigan, they're talking about building these huge AI centers. And what do you get? A lot of pushback, a lot of backlash because of fears, right? Yeah. So how does that affect the future of AI?
Well, I mean, that's where a lot of the investment is happening right now. And, the question is, is a certain point some of these going to be white elephants, essentially? Part of what's driving up, for example, our electricity bills right now are the huge power demands that these AI centers have. And the increase in demand that we're going to have going forward is largely driven by that as well. So the question is, how's that going to affect our prices in the long run? How's it going to affect the environment as a result of all the power generation that's going to happen? Those are all big questions out there right now.
In the minute and a half we have left, I want to talk about these tariffs and obviously the fact that the Supreme Court is saying they're considering saying, hey, look, you may have to pay back all the money, President Trump and the Trump administration, the U.S., to all of these countries and back money here, right? Yeah. What does that do? What's the economic impact of having to do something like that if it comes to a head?
Yeah, I think it's worth putting into perspective one thing. I mean, you have to remember, again, the American economy is a $30 trillion economy. It's a huge economy.
Say that again for the people in the back.
$30 trillion. Yeah, I mean, to give you just another kind of interesting statistic that kind of gives you a sense of perspective is every week, 50,000 people lose their jobs. Wow. And that's just the nature of kind of people changing jobs. It's just such a huge country with so so much going on. So in the global scheme of things, that's a relatively small amount of money. The bigger issue, though, again, and we've also talked about this before, is uncertainty. Where even where businesses, frankly, would love to see these tariffs go away, there also has been some concern that if they do go away, well, what happens next? And that's kind of the concern. They'd like to know what we can expect because that's what they can kind of price into their goods.
But Michael, having to pay back money for all of the tariffs that have been taken already, wouldn't that put a huge dent in our economy, even if it's a $30 trillion economy?
Well, I hate to say it, but it's just one more thing, that the federal government will be able to put on their debt. So
on the tab.
Yeah, you got it.
It's a pretty big bar tab at the end of the day that we have with our national debt.
Unfortunately, we're running it up at this point.
Michael Greiner, look, this is a story that continues, so we'll keep having you on. We always appreciate your expertise and putting it in a way that everyday people like me can understand. Thanks for your time.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Great to see you. We're asking the experts, by the way, throughout the week here on The Pulse. Tomorrow, Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio is in Studio C talking about the Epstein files fallout from a political standpoint. What are your questions? He's also answering your general political questions. MAGA versus Trump. Marjorie Taylor Greene and her rift with President Trump. What do you want to know? And Thursday, former auto supply chain executive Jan Griffiths is answering your questions about the T word that we've just been talking about, tariffs. To send in your question, email us at thepulse@fox.com or just scan the QR code on your screen to auto-launch your email. We look forward to hearing from you. Always love your questions. This show is built around you. All right, back to the Epstein files after the break. It's led to a major split between President Trump and one of his key allies. We're talking about that with Republican strategist Jason Rowe. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. Here to talk about the rift between President Trump and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene over the Epstein files. Republican strategist Jason Rowe. Jason, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Quite a rift.
Well, it is a rift. And I find it interesting, Jason, because, and by the way, for those who aren't familiar with Jason's work, you help strategize so many people's campaigns, messaging. What do we have going on right now when you have someone who was kind of like the woman who represented the MAGA movement all through those years, all of a sudden say, you know what, I'm pushing back?
There's a couple fractures going on in the MAGA coalition right now, but the biggest one is the Epstein fracture. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is certainly not unique. There's a lot of Trump supporters that, listen, Trump ran on releasing the Epstein files. So this is not like something that he's aggravated, that this came out of nowhere. This has been part of his narrative throughout the campaign and even at the beginning of the administration. Remember, it was February when Pam Bondi had that stunt with the conservative social media influencers where she was supposed to be giving them dossiers with more smoking guns, and it turned out to be nothing new. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and a couple others have been probably the loudest and most aggressive supporters of Donald Trump and MAGA, alienating everybody. They were instrumental in taking Kevin McCarthy down when he was Speaker. So to have this kind of a fracture between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene is pretty extraordinary.
So what happens now when President Trump is saying, look, I think the House should release it? Do things get better between MJT and Donald Trump?
That's a question I've been asking myself, because the back and forth between the two of them over the weekend would lead you to believe it's an irreparable breach, and he may want to make an example of her. But, it's also interesting how she is handling it, all of a sudden trying to mainstream herself, going on CNN Sunday and apologizing for her contribution to the vitriol in our political discourse when she was one of the main actors in all of that. To see her now tacking to the center. And there's a lot of people speculating that once he told her he wouldn't endorse her for a statewide office in Georgia, he outlived his utility to her, and that if she wants a future in Georgia politics, she has to mainstream herself. So she may have her own motives aside from the Epstein.
What does that
file.
say, though, about the MAGA movement in general? If you have someone who is one of the matriarchs of the MAGA movement essentially move away from it, it's not just a referendum on President Trump. It could be a referendum on the MAGA movement, yes?
It could, but I also think, there's a reality. He is now a lame duck. He's in the first year of a 4-year term, but he is turned out.
Not if he goes for a third term, right?
Well,
yeah, exactly.
whatever he says, I don't subscribe to that being a possibility.
I'm being facetious.
Of course you are. I think she's, probably looking at what her horizons are, but we are going to start seeing more and more of this. I think, given the state of the economy right now and the concerns after the election a couple weeks ago, there's going to be a lot of Republicans that are looking for a way to distance themselves, maybe not to alienate themselves from Trump world and MAGA, but to still find their own independent lane where they can live in a post-MAGA Republican Party if that's what the party looks like.
Going back one step and looking at the headwinds that you're looking at with President Trump basically kind of cowering to the MAGA movement. The MAGA folks are the ones who are saying, show us the files. And I feel like it's the first time I've seen President Trump actually follow the MAGA crowd instead of the other way around.
Yeah, I think he believed and has believed over the last weeks and months that his influence over MAGA would prevail. And I think what he realized over the weekend is this is one genie he let out of the bottle he can't get back in. And so that's why I think you see that 180-degree turn now saying, because I guarantee you when this all comes out, he's going to say, I'm the one that made this public. I'm the one that got Republicans to do this. This was going to happen with or without him. We know he hates to lose, so I think he found a way to get in the winner's circle on this. I also don't think he has as much exposure as the mainstream media has led people to believe. The cachet of emails that came out were treated in the mainstream media like a smoking gun. And if you read them, I would actually say they spoke well of how he was dealing with Epstein.
Well,
and so the number of Democrats that are implicated, it may become more of a Democratic problem than a Trump problem.
In the emails, it's very clear that President Trump, while he was in the room, who, by the way, he, as he said, kind of divorced the friendship in 2004, 2005. But when he was in the room, according to the email, apparently he had a conversation with Ghislaine Maxwell saying this is not a good idea, and essentially kind of, rebuking what was going on in that room, which was interesting. I do want to ask you about the economy, because you're a strategist, and you know that campaigns win because it's the economy's stupid, as James Carville famously said. Bottom line right now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, before this fight about Epstein, was fighting about the economy, saying that in my district in Georgia, people are not happy. Prices are way too high. I don't believe that the president understands what's really going on Main Street. Was that the first real kind of strike against President Trump from MJT?
Well, I think for all of congressional Republicans right now, there's high levels of anxiety because of what their constituents are feeling. Affordability, not just, what we watched happen over the ACA, Obamacare subsidies, because not everybody has those, but healthcare premiums, all kinds of insurance premiums have been going up year on year, and we're already being telegraphed by the insurance companies that premiums are going to go up significantly, independent of Obamacare. So there's a lot of stress. We are also seeing a lot of white-collar layoffs around the country. Major corporations. We just had Verizon last week announce 15,000 layoffs. And so right now we're not seeing that in the unemployment numbers, but we are going to see that. And what we're going to see is not working people, low-skill workers that are struggling to find jobs. We're going to find white-collar workers that are struggling to find jobs.
President Trump and President Biden have this in common. They promised a better economy and said it would happen quickly. And it's safe to say from every economist's viewpoint that has not happened. It didn't happen with Biden. It's not happening with Trump right now. The stock market's one thing. The bottom line on Main Street is different. We'll have to keep watching this one, and we will every step of the way. Jason Rowe, great to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse tonight. Thanks. That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Rup Raj. As always, it was good to be with you.